Falling in love with a woman you've never talked to sounds ridiculous, but I think a lot of guys have experienced this more than they'd ever admit, even if it's just slightly. And I know that because I've done it myself to an extent. I've spent way too much time thinking about a girl, imagining what a relationship with her would be like, and convincing myself that there was something there before I really even knew her. And the problem is, this isn't just some harmless crush, or most times it isn't. When you start falling for a version of someone that exists almost entirely in your own head, you can waste months or even years chasing something that was never even real in the first place. So today, I want to break down why men get obsessed with women they never talk to, how this happens without you even realizing it, and most importantly, how to stop doing it and actually build a real relationship and find the girl you're actually looking for. Because this fantasy is where that all spurts from. I think the first way this starts is by romanticizing every little thing she does, whether it's online or a girl in class or somebody at work, right? And this can happen so subtly that you don't even realize you're doing it. She says hi to you in the hallway, she sits near you in class, she likes your post on Instagram, and maybe she walks with you to your car after work. I don't know what it looks like for you. Maybe she does sets with you at the gym. Maybe she offers you a pencil, and suddenly your brain starts going, wait, does this girl like me? And there's nothing wrong with noticing that a girl might be interested in you, because you can absolutely tell a lot by somebody's actions. If she's consistently trying to be around you, starting conversations, making an effort to see you, or looking for opportunities to spend time with you alone, those things can actually mean something very important and very big. The problem is when you start taking one completely normal interaction or normal thing and turning it into your own love story, pretty much, right? She gives you a pencil and now you're imagining what a first date might look like. She said hi and now you're wondering what your kids are going to look like together, right? And that sounds ludicrous, but it can happen, right? She can like your Instagram post and you're convinced that you guys are going to now share a first kiss sometime soon. And the more you do this, the more attached you become, not necessarily because she is actually giving you a reason to be attached, but because you've started interpreting everything she does as proof that she feels the same way. You're not building a relationship with her. You're building a relationship with your interpretation of who she could be through your own imagination. And that's where this can get really dangerous, because once you start believing there's something there, your brain is going to start looking for more evidence to keep that fantasy alive and keep it going and fuel the fire. And that's where this continues, because romanticizing every little thing is really just the beginning. Because the next step is where this gets a lot more serious. You start building her in your mind. Usually this starts with something as simple as finding her attractive. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. You should probably find women attractive if you are attracted to them, right? I find women attractive as well. But when physical attraction is basically the only thing you know about a person, when you know about a girl, your brain has a lot of empty space to fill in. You don't know her values, you don't know her personality, you don't know her interests, you don't know how she treats people or what she's actually like in a relationship. So you start filling in those blanks yourself, whether you try to or not. And obviously, you're not going to imagine the worst version of her. You're going to imagine the perfect version. You start thinking about how much you'd have in common, how well you'd get along, what your dates would be like, how much she'd love you, and all that fun stuff. And suddenly, you've created this entire person without ever actually getting to know her. And that's the problem with this. The girl you're thinking about isn't necessarily the girl who exists. You can't just build somebody's personality and build what somebody's going to be like just by how they look. She might have completely different interests, different values, a completely different personality, and honestly, you might not even like each other once you've actually talked. You might not actually like her. And that can really lead to a weird realization, because you spent all this time thinking, she's exactly what I've been looking for. This is the one, when in reality you don't really even know her, only to finally get to know her and realize she's nothing like the person you've been imagining. You're not falling for her. You're falling for the version of her that you've created in your head. And the longer you let that fantasy develop, the harder it becomes to separate what you actually know about her from what you've simply made up. And that can be really hard, especially if you do get a chance to get to know her eventually. And again, this whole process becomes way worse with social media. Because now you don't just have your imagination, you have an entire profile you can keep going back to and feeding the fantasy. And again, like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with being attracted to a woman. That's completely normal. but social media gives you an endless supply of her appearance without giving you the reality of who she actually is. You see the best pictures, the best angles, the best outfits, the best hair, the best makeup, the best angle, the best lighting, all of that, right? And you're basically getting a highlight reel of her physical appearance. Then what happens? You go back and look again, and you look again tomorrow, and then you're checking her Instagram before you go to bed, or right when you wake up, or scrolling through her pictures when you're bored, and every time you do that, you're reinforcing the attraction that's already there. You're basically feeding an obsession. And the dangerous part is that you're getting more and more familiar with her face while knowing almost nothing about her as a person. You can start feeling like you know someone simply because you've looked at their profile 100 times, when in reality, you still might not know a single meaningful thing about this person. And eventually, you're not even using social media to see what she's up to anymore. You're using it to maintain the fantasy you've created about her, whether you realize you're doing it or not. If you are frequently checking the same girl's Instagram page when she hasn't posted anything new, you're probably doing something that's a little wrong or maybe just slightly weird. And I say that with love and honesty. And that being said, I think this next point ties everything together, which is the fantasy doesn't really come with any risk, which makes this really, really dangerous. Think about what actually has to happen if you want a real relationship. You have to talk to this girl. You have to ask her out. You might have to send a first text or a first DM, even if it's a small thing. Eventually, you might have to tell her how you feel. And in every single one of those things, there comes this thing called rejection. She could say no. She could. She could leave you on red. She could tell you she's not interested. She could screenshot a Snapchat message that you send her and send it to all of her friends in a group chat, and they all make fun of you. That's really uncomfortable to think about. But when you just sit at home thinking about her, there's none of that. You get to experience all the excitement of having a crush without ever having to find out whether the relationship could actually work. You can just imagine the dates, imagine her liking you, imagining what it would like to be together, and you have to never risk hearing the answer no. And that's why I think this can become so easy to get stuck in. The fantasy gives you the feeling without requiring you to take the risk. You can stay comfortable, keep thinking about her, keep checking her profile, and keep telling yourself maybe something will happen someday, but eventually you're gonna have to realize that sitting around fantasizing isn't gonna get you any closer to actually being with her. You're getting the comfort of a relationship without ever having one. And that's kind of where this whole thing falls apart. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't think this is a good way to live. Having a crush on a girl is one thing. I've had many crushes before, but I've had ones that have also gone too far. That being said, building an entire relationship with someone you've never even talked to is ultimately just fantasy. So what's the alternative? Well, it's probably the answer you don't want to hear. You actually have to get uncomfortable. You have to actually talk to her. You have to ask her out. You have to get to know her. And no, I'm not saying you need to walk up to some girls at a mall with some pickup lines, ask for the number, act super confident, just like there's Instagram reels of dudes doing all over the place and YouTube shorts of dudes doing that all over the place too. You don't have to do that. Real relationships don't have to happen like that, and oftentimes they really don't. I met my girlfriend in a finance class at college, ran into her again at a Christian event because we're both Christians. I then got her number, and eventually I took her on a date. And that was it, right? Again, it was still hard asking her out on the date. It was still hard approaching her for the first time and having a conversation. That uncomfortability never went away. However, the more you actually put yourself out there, the more opportunities you're naturally going to create. And you don't need hundreds of opportunities either. I have this philosophy in life, and it kind of applies to girls a lot too, that it only takes one. One guy could ask out 100 girls that he doesn't know and just takes shots with and could get rejected 100 times. Or you could ask one girl out at the right time and it could just work out. You don't know until you actually try, and yeah, she might reject you. She might tell her friends. You might feel a little bit of embarrassment. But that's just part of the deal, man. That's life. You have to be willing to take that rejection sometimes instead of choosing the comfort of sitting at home and fantasizing about someone that you don't really even know. And look, this is where I'm gonna get a little vulnerable with you. I know this because I've done the exact opposite. I had a crush on a girl from around 6th grade all the way through my senior year of high school. Literally years. And eventually I finally asked her out because I didn't want to live in the fantasy anymore, and she said yes. I was so excited that I'd finally gotten the girl I'd spent all those years thinking about, fantasizing about, and I really wasn't even focused about getting to know her on the first, second, and third date. And after those passed, eventually things ended. She ended things with me, I'll admit that, but looking back, I realized something really important. We just weren't really a good match. And that sounds really stupid, but it's true. I had spent years building this person up in my head. So finally getting the opportunity to date her felt like the conclusion of this huge story I'd created in my head that I finally got to live out. But once reality actually entered the picture, I realized reality didn't really care about the story that I created in my head. Sometimes you're going to be attracted to each other. You go on a date and it just doesn't work. And that's okay. That's how life works. That's actually the point of dating. That's why we don't meet at the altar anymore. That's why we don't get married at first sight. You're supposed to find out who someone really is, not decide who they're going to be before you've even met them. So if there's a girl you've been obsessing over, stop refreshing her Instagram page and stop building this perfect version of her in your head. Go talk to her, ask her out, and get to know her. Maybe it's as simple as a DM. Maybe it's actually going up to her in person. I don't know what it is for you. And maybe it'll work, and maybe it won't. But either way, you're finally dealing with reality. And that's a whole lot better than spending months falling in love with someone who only exists in your imagination. That being said, if you're ready to stop obsessing over girls you've never actually talked to and actually want to find a real, true relationship and a perfect girlfriend, I made a video specifically about that. It's called How to Find a High Quality Girl to Date in 2026. I think you should go ahead and check that out, and I'll see you over there.